Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. In the red corner and in the green corner we have our two Miltonias that we're going to play with throughout this growing season, and today we start with their first feed, which today will be the same for both. Yeah, actually I might do one a little bit higher so that we can start the ball rolling, which is the goal, is to actually feed one a lot higher than the other one. So we've got to start sometime, haven't we? I mean, we're into February now. We'll give it a go. Right, before anybody asks, this is what I have available. Some or all of this may or may not get used, but it's there. I use the MSU formula, but what's inside here is not what it says on the tin. It is, but it isn't. The original MSU fertilizer was got for me by a YouTube friend while he was in the States, and he was staying in a hotel. He was over there on work basically, and he ordered it online from First Rays to be delivered to the hotel, and then he returned from the States with his tub of white powder through customs in the USA, flew to Spain, through customs in Spain with a tub of white powder. I did say good luck with that. And then he posted it on to me in the UK. So that's how I got the original stuff. What's in here is a replacement, but I'm using the tub because it's a nice size and a nice airtight tub. But I reordered the MSU fertilizer from one of the manufacturers that actually does the rainwater formula, Greenacre I think it was, and I ordered from them direct. Now that came in a plastic bag that wasn't resealable, so basically I poured it into here so that I've got an airtight container to hold my MSU fertilizer in. I'll see if I can hold the camera still enough to focus on that, but that basically is the formula. So if you want to read it carefully, you're quite welcome to pause the video, but I'm not reading it out. Basically it's got nitrate nitrogen in it at 13%, the phosphorus is at 3%, the potassium is at 15%, and then it's got 8% calcium, 2% magnesium, and lots of little bits which are essential but tiny amounts. So that's the basic formula. And that's what's in there, even though it's not the original stuff. Then in addition to that, I've got calcium nitrate, which I do use on occasions. That provides extra calcium and a bit of nitrogen, not a lot but some. It's actually a reasonable amount. It's worth knowing that the nitrogen is in that as well as the calcium. And then here we have Epsom salts, or as I like to call it, magnesium sulfate. Yes, so we've got some of that as well. I don't use that very often, but it's available to me. And then I also have some liquid seaweed, which I use on occasions, and it really is not very often. And then the other stuff I've got, because obviously once I start mixing these feeds up at various strengths, I need to check the pH. And if it's too low, I need something to raise it up again, and if it's too high, I need something to lower it down again. And I use two very simple things. That's not what it says on the tin. Inside there is a very mild solution of citric acid, yes? And I use that for pH down, which works quite well, and you don't need much. And if I need to raise my pH, which I do, if I mix up quite a strong feed, I know the pH is going to be quite low. And sometimes it's a lot lower than I want, so I need to raise it back up again, and I use the bicarbonate of soda as a pH up, which works quite well. I also have CalMag. I use the Vitalink stuff, which is it makes all the ingredients readily available to the plants. Basically you've got, I can't flip and read that, can't focus on it, it's too small. Well, maybe you can if I hold the camera still. Again, you can pause the video and enlarge it and have a look and see what you've got. But basically you've got calcium, magnesium, a bit of nitrogen and some iron, all of which are readily available with that. So that's what's available to me. This is what I feed with. During the growing season, this gets added relatively frequently. This gets added less frequency, less frequently. This gets added even less frequently, and I'm quite happy that this can go in with any combination of those. I don't mind doing that, but I don't add that and that at the same time, because they're not compatible. They don't work. They bond basically and produce something that's neither that nor that. So I don't do that. So either that or that, but better still, just use that, which is compatible. So there we go. That's relatively new. This for the. I got it towards the end of last year because I sort of ran out, and so I bought a new one. So yeah, it's a sort of recent thing. And then to make sure all that is working okay and at the right sort of strength and everything, I've got a cheapo TDS meter that works quite well, and a bit more expensive pH meter that also seems to work quite well. And I keep a glass there because once I've mixed up my feed, I actually stand the pH meter in some of that water and walk away from it for a bit, because it takes a while to adjust to the reading from its neutral position, if you see what I mean. So I just let it stand in there, and then I give it a waggle around and get the reading. Right, so that's what there is available. I use RO water. There is some in there now. I mean, I can show you the TDS on that. It normally comes out at about 9, sometimes 10, sometimes 11, but it's pretty neutral. Helps if you turn it on. 9. Good guess, wasn't it? Good guess, good guess. So we're starting off with a TDS of 9, which effectively is discountable. It's not worth worrying about. So when I mix up a feed, if I'm aiming for 100 parts per million, I take no notice of the 9. But ultimately it means my parts per million of my mixed up feed is always a fraction lower than I actually want, and I'm happy with that. If it was higher, I might think about it. So that's its base level. I won't bother attempting to so I'll just stand that in there for now because it's wet. I won't bother attempting to get the pH of the RO water, because pH meters just don't measure RO water. They've got nothing to get hold of. There's nothing there for them to sort of measure, and it normally screws them up, and they run wild. They give you all sorts of weird and wonderful readings and won't settle. So you need to get something in there before you sort of play with the pH. So I'll set the camera up on the tripod. We'll mix up some feed and try and get it right. I've got some extra RO water there in case I mix the feed up a little bit stronger than I actually want, in which case I'll dilute it a bit. And although we're only dealing with 2 plants here, I am about to water in here, so I'm quite happy that my mounts, although they're due a flush today, once I've added in some extra water and reduced it down, they will in effect get a very low level feed, because it'll be whatever I've got in here diluted down enough that I can do my mounts and then follow on with some of the pots. I'm not doing them all today, but I'll do a lot. So we get the tripod set up, and we get going, and we'll get these 2 sorted out. Okay, that's somewhere near it. Yeah, you can generally see what's going on. Right, now I know this is going to be different to what I said. I'm just going to leave it here because that is an airtight container, and I do it up incredibly tight, and I do it up so tight that sometimes I can't even get it undone, and I have to get a gadget to help me. So what I do is I take some of it out and put it in this little container, which is easily unclipped, is also airtight, yeah, and I keep some in here, and when this gets a bit low I'll top it up again, yeah. So that's how I work. So we haven't got too much in there, and I don't want a strong feed, so we'll put about that much in, which is not actually, I need a little bit more. I know that's not going to be enough. All right, we'll do that. And because we're in a very moist atmosphere, we put the lid straight back on and don't leave it open, because that type of fertilizer sucks in flipping moisture out of the air faster than you can look at it. So don't leave your lid off. Otherwise, next time you come to use it, you'll find it's starting to clump together where the moisture's got in there. And once it gets moist, if it's left like that for any length of time, again, some of the elements can start to bond and change their properties. So keep it dry, keep it airtight. And I need my towel as well. I'm well organised today, aren't I? Because I'm going to get my hands wet. See, normally all this is in there in the dining room where I do all this, because that's where everything lives. But I can't film very well in there doing this sort of thing. So, right, so what we'll do now is we'll give that a good stir. My RO water is at room temperature. Actually, it's slightly above room temperature because I lean the containers. I lean a little row of them against the radiator, so they actually get a bit of heat from the radiator. So they're always a nice tepid sort of feel to them. You know, you don't put your hand in and go, "Cool, blimey." It's nice and comfortable. So what have we got then? What have we got? What we've got is 73. That's a bit lower than I want. So we add a little bit more. And this time it will be a little bit too. Something like that. I'm aiming for about 110. Just to give you a guideline. I should have shut up and not told you what I was aiming at, and then I could have pretended that I guessed it spot on. But it's, you know, it goes up and down, and if I make it up too strong, I add water to just wind it down again. So until I get it somewhere near where I want it. Not exactly where I want it, somewhere near. Because quite honestly, the difference between 110 parts per million and 120 and 130 is hardly worth talking about. So somewhere near it. So, as I said, I'm aiming for somewhere around 110. And what have we got this time? This time we've got 105, that'll do. That's close enough for me. So hang on, let me just put this on hold. In case we have any disbelievers. I assume you can see that. Anyway, it says 105. Trust me, I'm a professional. Right, so we can turn that off for now. And put the lid back on, and then it'll stand up. And then it'll stand up, he says, watching it fall over. Right, and then what I do is I get some of that water and make sure it's not too deep for the pH meter and coming up above the water line. This one is supposed to be waterproof, but I'm not a trusting person. If you don't get the water up above the water line, it doesn't matter whether it's waterproof or not, does it? You're not going to damage your meter. Now normally I would go and get a coffee or something like that, and I say normally, so why the hell not? I'll be back. Okay, we're on the black stuff today because I've run out of milk, which is a flipping nuisance, but so be it. So I will have to go out and risk life and limb to get some flipping milk and go around the shops. And talking of risking life and limb, I phoned up the surgery this morning as arranged last week, and my appointment to get a hole in my arm is 9:10 on Thursday morning. And then 2 or 3 weeks later I can walk around the streets going, meh. Like you think that's going to happen? As far as I'm concerned, nothing changes whether I've had the flipping jab or not. I'm still treating everybody as a hostile. With my imaginary 2 metre long pointed stick. Do you believe it's an imaginary stick, do you? You don't actually believe that I've got a real 2 metre long pointed stick for poking people with? Oh dear. Anyway, let's see what this thing says. We might have to play. We shall see. A lot of it depends on how long I've stored the RO water for, because the pH alters. It does seem to drop down very slowly. Now I've got no hold button on this, so you're going to have to believe me, because I'm not getting the camera over here. It currently says, when it makes its mind up, these are so slow to settle. This one flicks around and then it just suddenly stops moving, and like that's it then, you know, within a bit. It goes to 2 decimal places, and quite honestly it's the 2 decimal places that flick around, and they don't matter. You know, you know, at the moment it says 6.18, 6.17, 6.19, 6.1. It's 6.2. Near enough. So anyway, my pH is 6.2. This is going into new media, which is bark, charcoal, and sponge rock. So 6.2 is fine. Yeah. If that was in the old days when I still had moss in the mix, then I would worry about it being 6.2, because as soon as I watered the pot, the moss would drop it down. So I'd probably take it up to sort of 6.5, 6.6, allowing the pot to drop it down a bit. But I very rarely go low with the pH. I think 5.8 is about the lowest I would tolerate. I know some people accept that going down to 5.5 is okay. I just don't, because some elements do better at a low pH, some do better at a high pH. Some do reasonably well across the whole range. And one of those is the nitrogen, and that's the one that makes stuff grow most of the time. Right, so we now have nothing to write that down on, but I've got it on video. It was 105 parts per million with a pH of 6.2, near enough. So that's what will go in the records. That is for plant number 1. So let's get it done and try not to make a mess and get the fertilised water in my coffee. Now this is not what I'd normally do. I'd normally have a subset of this water, a small amount to water a few plants and then top it up. But I'm only watering 2 plants and they're in fresh media. So the runoff is not going to be worth noting. It's just not worth bothering with. So the idea is to give it a good soak. Make sure the whole pot is wet, because it's not going to see any water again for some considerable time at this time of year. So go all round the sides, all round the edges, and make sure some goes down through the middle, because basically speaking, after a repot that wasn't that long ago, where are most of the old roots in the pot? Yeah, they're in the middle, aren't they? They're not round the edge yet. That's where the new roots will head for. Right, so that's plant number 1. We'll go back up there. That's the spectaculus done at 105 parts per million. I'm making a mess here, aren't I? Never mind, as long as it don't go in my coffee, I don't mind. So what I'm going to do now is add a bit more feed. And it will be a bit too, not a lot. I want to take this up to about, I'll accept 130 is okay, 150 tops, but I'd rather not go quite that high this time round. So we will add a small amount. And we'll hope that that ends up, I'd like it about 130, but as I say, a little bit more, no big deal. A little bit less, and the difference is hardly notable, is it? So we'll see what we get. And once I increase the feed, the chances are the pH is going to drop even lower, and we will have to bring it back up a bit, because I'd like the pH to be the same for both plants. 128. That's a good guess, isn't it? Actually, I'm going to put a fraction more in. 128. So let's throw that on the floor. Won't do any good at all. So we'll try and sort of get 140-ish, perhaps, just a tiny little bit more. I'll probably end up overcooking it now. I've got too much in it. But whatever this comes out at now, this is what they're going to get. Or it's going to get. This is just for one plant at the moment. I shall have a look at my records, and I've got a feeling the mounts got fed last time round, so I don't want to feed them again. I want to have a flush. 140 exactly. Stick it on hold for the disbelievers amongst you, if there are any. Yeah. So parts per million is now 140. So that's an increase of 35 parts per million, which as a percentage of 105 is actually quite an increase. And if you put the blue top on the blue meter, it fits. If you put the black one on there, it doesn't. It's because I'm not in my normal place. Right, now we will check the pH, but I suspect we've dropped down now a bit. It won't be much, but it's probably dropped down. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Yeah, it's hovering about 5.93, 5.95. So 5.9-ish then, so we've dropped down 3 points on the scale, which is more than I'm prepared to accept when you're trying to treat the plants the same, if you know what I mean. So we will need to take it up a bit, and I use the bicarb of soda. Now this will be fun, trying to show you the amount. Right, first of all we have wet finger, and then we dip it in there. That is too much. That will take it up 5, 6 or even 7 points. So we'll put at least half of that back. I know that means there's a bit of damp getting in there, but this costs like £2 and so far it's lasted me 3 years. So that may be too much. Yeah, it really is a tiny amount with this stuff. A real tiny amount. So just wash our finger off in there. It's really technical this, isn't it? Right. Now we'll actually tip our water back in there now. Don't want to waste it, do we? And then we'll see what that has done. Now that stuff, the bicarb, if you take a reading not long after you've stirred it in, you'll get a reading which has risen. If you come back in 5 minutes, it's gone up a little bit more. So it seems to, you know, the longer you leave it, the more it sort of rises, but only a small amount from the original measurement. Right, what have we got now? What did we have before? 6.2, wasn't it? Right, that says 6.24. 6.24, 6.25, 6.2, that's close enough. It is a fraction higher than the pH we had before. Right, so increase in feed, bring the pH back to same level, the reason being I want to treat these the same except for the feed. And if you start playing around with the pH, you will alter what the plant absorbs. So try and keep the pH the same if you're doing an experiment. And then we'll give this one the higher feed level for its first feed in the experiment. So we've already bumped it up a little bit, but we are still at a very low level. Both of these feed levels are very low. Nothing extortionate or high about a parts per million of less than 150. It's not a problem. Right, so that's that one done. So I'll just let as much drain out as possible because I don't like them sitting in water. They've got feet on the bottom of the pots, so if there was a bit of a dribble in the drip tray, the bottom of the pot wouldn't be touching it, just the feet. Right, so there we go. 2 pots watered, 2 different feed levels, not that different at the moment, but next time they get watered, the benchmark one will probably get the same level, about 105, 110, and the other one will go up a bit more. So it'll head up towards, say, 160, something like that, next time round. And then the time after that, we'll keep this one the same, low, and this one will go up even higher, until eventually we're around the 110 mark for the red plant, and this one will be up like 210, 220. I don't propose going much higher than that. But then, when we get well into the growing season, and both of these plants are stonking away, this one's going to come up as well. So this one will come up to, say, a base of 150, 160, maybe a little higher. This one will head up approximately double. So eventually we'll get up to 160, 170, maybe even 180 for plant number 1. And plant number 2, the green one, will be up around the 300 mark, possibly even a bit higher. But not till we get into the growing season proper, where I've got my 11-hour day lengths back and some. Yeah, and we've got warmer daytime temperatures due to the outside temperatures coming up. So we'll be patient and we'll build it up gradually. So there we go. That's the first one of the experiment where we've actually done something. And as I said, I won't be filming these plants every time I water them, because that's too much, especially once we get into the growing season. But I will possibly do a report each time I water them, tagged on the end of another video or something like that. That's my trickery to get you to watch right till the end. Anyway, thanks for dropping by, and that's where we are at the start. Long way to go to get, we need to get up to end of October, November time probably before this project's finished, or at least until we get some blooms open on these two, yeah? And then we can see how many blooms we got on and how many spikes we got on each one, bearing in mind they've both got 4 new growths, so in theory they should have 4 spikes, but maybe more, it might be less, who knows. Right, see you next time, thanks for dropping by.